Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to rig an arm. Now I've already done this before on my YouTube channel, so if you want you can refer back to rigging an arm with Deformers and Toon Boom Harmony parts 1 and 2. They're both close to an hour, but they go into a lot of detail. I'm going to try to go a little faster in this one, but just so you know. Okay, so I'm going to go to the arm. And tell you what, I want to focus on the arm. So when I want to focus on something, I want to add a display. So you can come up here to the little hamburger menu, insert display. The shortcut is Control Y. It's worth memorizing that one. Hold Alt. If you hover underneath things, it will try to sense where it can hook up to. I want to hook it up underneath my arm composite. And then I'm going to choose Display 2. And now I can focus here on building just the arm. Okay, upper arm. Alt-Y, and I am going to copy these circles. So actually I'm using a select tool. Select these circles. Need to be on the line art layer. Control-C, overlay, Control-V. I'm going to go to the drawing view so it's even easier. There's a white background. I'm going to uncheck this eyeball. So line art has all of these. Overlay has just these circles. Okay. So now I'm going to select these circles again and press copy paste again. Now notice that it went down and to the right. If you hold shift up and shift left, if you press that once, shift up, shift left, they'll go back to where they belong. And then I'm going to click on one of them, hold Shift and Alt and make it super tiny. Shift and Alt, make it super tiny. And then I'm going to shift select both of these, and I am going to make the maximum size of that line 1. Okay, so it's nice and tiny. I'm going to shrink this even more. Shift and Alt. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of that stuff. I'm going to right click here and choose in the color view. I want swatch mode. I'm going to choose handle, or sometimes what I do is I make another swatch called joints or invisible. Yeah, invisible will be better. Okay, and I'll go like this bright magenta or pink. Okay, so what these are, this is just for me to have some backup circles in case I need to get back to a perfect circle for the joints. And I am actually going to put these on the underlay layer. I'll show you what I'm up to later. Okay, so they live on the underlay layer now. And so now I can use my cutter tool and K, I can show my strokes. This is the line art. I can trim this stuff out. Now I can select all that and join it, Alt-J, and I think that I don't want this to have this curvature here. Let me delete that. I want it to be pretty straight. Delete that. Okay. There, I'm just adjusting the lines a little bit. Alright, next up, let's go to the forearm, do the same kind of thing. Cutter tool. Oh, wait, actually, I need to copy this. In fact, I could just go to the upper arm, underlay, and copy the outer circle and the inner circle, copy that. Come to the forearm on the underlay and paste it there, right? Because they were both referring to the same circle that's shared at the elbow. Okay. Now I am going to trim using the cutter tool. Join these. Play with these handlebars just a little bit. And then let's see how that looks. We'll go to the camera view where you can see everything. See if that's lining up okay. It looks like it's lining up okay to me. Alright, so what do we do next? Next, I would actually like to, I don't want to paint the color in yet. I want to actually start setting the pivots. So we're actually going to begin building now. So I'm going to select all of these, the hand, the cuff line, the forearm, the upper arm. I'm going to press Control-Shift-P. This adds a peg to all of them, and it is named after the drawing layer that's below it. So this is great. I'm going to give myself a little bit more room to work here in the node view. Now what I want to do is I'm going to select the upper arm peg and the forearm peg, and I'm going to press Control-Shift-P again. Now, we don't like having the -P in there, so I'm just going to call it -MP for master peg. Same here for the upper arm. Okay. Alright, now when the forearm moves, when it squashes and stretches, I think I want the cuff line to squash and stretch with it every time. So I am directly going to parent that here. I'll show you this parenting stuff in a second. I want this forearm master peg to hook up to the hand, move this upper arm up here, this peg, connect it to the forearm. Now let me show you, we'll set some pivot points now. So I am going to select all three of these, the drawing layer as well as the pegs. I'll press Alt-3, which is the shortcut to get the Advanced Animation toolbar. That's what this toolbar is called, Advanced Animation. It's the Rotate tool. And the Rotate tool shows you this pivot with a circular yellow shape around it. I'm zooming in and I am putting it in the perfect place for this to rotate from. Okay? So because I selected all three of those, it's set for the drawing, it's set for that peg, and it's set for that peg. Awesome. Let's do this with the forearm. Let me just show you the slow way to do it. What if I had just set it for these two? I'm still on the Rotate tool. And what if I had forgotten to set that one? You know, that pivot's still over there. What you can do is you can open up the layer properties of both of these, and then you can copy and paste the pivot information from one to the other. Control-C, Control-V. And now they both have the same pivot information. Now for the hand, Alt-3, let's bring it down here, just wherever is best for it to rotate from, center of the arm. And then the cuff line. When I do lines, I usually like to put it on the edge, like at a corner, because now when I use the transform tool, I can skew it. And when it's in the middle, it's a little weirder to try doing that kind of thing. So that's my preference. Alright, there we go. We've got that working now. So as I click on this, this is where things would rotate from. Now, I want you to just watch what I'm doing. I'm pressing Alt and I'm holding the middle mouse button. I'm clicking on it and holding it. I can hold anywhere on the screen in the camera to rotate. Normally, you have to go to that little zone of influence at the corner to rotate. And trust me, it is worth memorizing that. Alt, middle mouse, you'll be able to animate a lot faster. I press B, it goes up the chain, so now if I were to rotate, it moves the entire arm. Same thing with the forearm, I can move the forearm independently, I can squash and stretch it independently, or if I press B, now it's going to bring the hand with it. Okay, so this is how we like to, this is called a peg hierarchy. Okay. Alright, next up, we want to start paint bucketing things in. Now, the reason that I set the pegs now before painting is this these invisible articulation circles that are on the underlay layer. I wanted to still be able to see those while I was setting the pivots. Now I'm going to go to the upper arm, Alt-Y, which is Paint Unpainted. That's my favorite paint bucket tool. And I'm going to choose Clothes. I'll go to... I'm not going to do this yet. I'm actually going to add some extra contour points before I do that. So here I am on the line art layer. I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to add a bunch of extra contour points because I know that I'm going to be adding deformers to this, and I will be deforming this art a lot. And so if there's not enough contour points, the deformers, when they get close together, will start to break and look like a bunch of little straight lines instead of a nice curve. So things that you're going to deform a lot, you want to add a bunch of extra contour points to. Alright, I'm just going to take a little break here to show you what I'm talking about with that stuff. So I have this box and it just has 4 points, and then with the transform tool, if I'm moving these, look at what that deformation looks like right there in the corners. Do you see that? Looks kind of gross. And that's what you get when you don't have enough deformation points. So I'm going to go into the drawing view with the contour editor. I'm going to hold Control, add some more points throughout. And then it usually deforms quite a bit better. It has more geometry to deform. So there is a button that you can use to generate all of that stuff, and it's called like Create Breaking Triangles, I think. But it usually makes way too many. Oh, that's really not too bad. So guess you can try that. Alright, and now I'm going to go Alt-Y to paint unpainted, put it in there. Use the select tool, cut, go to the color art, paste, come back up to the line art. Alright, so that's looking good. I'm going to do the same thing over here for the forearm. I'm going to go to the contour editor, and I'm going to hold Control, add a bunch of points. Oops. Okay, so now I've got that working. Now I need the cuff to only show up when it's on the forearm. So I'm going to start splitting my pieces apart now. Now I'm going to show you a couple ways to do this. I'm going to go to the node library. And you could type these things in if you wanted to. I'm going to go down to Filter, Isolate. Okay, and I am going to bring in all of them. I'm going to bring in the overlay layer. I'm going to bring in the line art, color art, underlay, and auto patch. I'm going to go full screen here so I can just see this a little bit better. Alright, so I've got the overlay, line art, color art, underlay, auto patch. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. And I actually want this for the forearm and the upper arm and some of it for the hand. So you can see that I'm going to have to slide these very, very far apart from each other in order to make this work. I will go ahead and leave it this way for the arm, but for the leg I am going to abbreviate these. Okay, I still need room for the 3-letter prefix, which I will add at the end. So, alright, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a little group out of these. Control G. And I'm just going to call these my layers, or isolate layers. And I'm going to exit full screen mode, Control F. And then I'm going to go to the isolate layers and center on selection up here in my other node view. I've got 2 open. Then I'll go into it here. Okay. So now, I know you probably wonder why I'm doing this, but just watch. I'm going to select all these, Control C, Control V, and now I am going to put a prefix on all of them. Up, arm, underscore. Oh, looks like we're going to need even more room, won't we? So this is why we like to abbreviate things. and I'm going to be doing this a bunch, so I just want to make some room up here. I'm holding middle mouse to click nowhere and still move them. Okay. Alright, so here we go. This is how we do the arm. I am going to hold Alt, drag this in, so now just the color is showing. Normally all the overlay, line art, color art, and underlay all come through this blue cable. But this says I only want you to show the color art coming through. So that's the only part coming through right there. I'm going to disable the other pieces of the arm so that you can focus a little bit better on what's happening. Okay. So now if I plug a cable from here to here and I plug the lines in, now I've got the line art. So this is filtering out just the color art, this is filtering out just the line art. I don't have anything on the overlay yet, but I will just drag a cable and just click it to the top. Drag a cable from here, put it to the underlay, drag a cable from here and put it on the auto patch. Okay, now the underlay has our backup circles. I don't need to see those, so I won't connect it to the composite. But the auto patch is going to be really handy in just a second. I'm going to go full screen again. Give myself some more room. I'm holding middle mouse as I select things and then drag it around. Middle mouse. Okay. Now I'm going to exit full screen mode and I'm going to copy all of my overlay, underlay, auto patch stuff, paste it here. And I'm going to use the little prefix script. And I'm going to say forearm underscore. Alright, so they've all got forearm on them now. And I'm going to show you a little shortcut. I'm going to disable, or I'm going to use cable cutters. These are really cool. You just slice that cable. So the forearm right now, if I turn it on, you won't see it because it's not connected to a composite or a display or anything. But watch this. If I hold Control, I click on this bottom port and just keep holding Control while clicking on these others, it will automatically connect to all of those, which is nice. And then, let's see, I want the line art to come through, so I'll plug this in to the left of the upper arm, so this will be in front of the upper arm. Then the color art just to the right of that cable. Actually, maybe I'll just unhook these cuff lines and everything. Cable cutters, I have a shortcut, you can set shortcuts for those. Okay, so right now we've got the lines and the color for the forearm and the lines and the color for the upper arm. Okay, so what I want is I actually want this interior line to get cut away by the color of the upper arm. So that means I need to bring in a cutter. Type in cutter in your node library. You can hold Alt to drag it into the cable. You can now drag the color art from the upper arm over here and cut it. Okay, now that looks weird. I don't want it missing those chunks of the circle. Let's see why it's doing that, okay? Let's go to the upper arm, the drawing view. It's just easier to see one thing at a time. Look at how wide, when we paint bucket, this line was created with a pencil stroke. So that just means like we can move this and it moves the whole line, right? But when we paint bucket, it actually goes to the middle. If I were to cut and paste it on top, you would see it's going to the middle of the stroke line, okay? I'm going to delete that. So in the camera view, what's happening is it's telling it cut away the lines of the forearm with that color art that goes to the middle of the line. Okay, well, we don't want that. That's cutting away too much. Is there something else that we could use? Really what we want is we want it to be cut away by the color minus whatever is on the lines. That is what the auto patch does, okay? And I am going to just show you, I'm going to add another display, Control Y. I'm going to hold Alt so just to try to help you understand this a little better, okay? So here's the lines. I hold Alt. Here's the color art. And then here is the auto patch. Notice how the auto patch is a lot thinner It's taking the color art stuff minus the line stuff, and it gives you just the inside stuff. Okay? So now I'm going to switch back to display 2. That's the one that I'm working on with the arm. So I'm going to drag a cable from the auto patch over to here. There we go. That's what we want. That's how you use the auto patch. All right, well, let's see how this works. If I rotate this, yeah, that looks pretty great. What if I want like a little elbow crease? How would I go about doing that? That's what I want to do next. So next what I want to do is I want to put some line art stuff onto the overlay layer. Okay. Now, keep it clear in your mind. You can't click on one of these and then draw art. You have to click on the art layer itself. These are just little filter layers that are sitting down below. Okay. So I want to hook in the overlay layer so I'll be able to see it. Okay. So I'm going to use a little waypoint. Watch this. If you click on the cable, you go to the very middle, there'll be this little baby waiting to be born. You click on it. All right, I'm using middle mouse. I selected it, moved it over here, just so there's not as many crisscross cables, just to make it more clear for us to understand what's happening. I'm going to go to the forearm, and I am going to select these lines, copy them, paste them on the overlay. Now watch what happens. So we have that full set of lines sitting up here now, right? They're showing up because they are coming through this cable. They're not getting cut by anything. So what we're going to do is, sometimes I like to like turn this green or something so I can just get a better idea of what's happening here. I am going to use the cutter tool, so Alt-T, and I am going to cut there and maybe here. So just where the circle starts to curve into the rest of the arm. Delete this. Now I'm going to use my pencil editor tool. This is like the width tool for the pencil. And then I'm going to pull this straight up. It makes this nice little curve, little taper. Same thing over here. Now I'm going to select those lines, and I am going to color it back to the regular color, which was the clothes line color. Now watch what happens. When I rotate, that thing will show up there. Now that's a really thick taper. So maybe I want to touch that up a little bit. I'm going to go back to the overlay layer. I'll add some stuff here. And if you're going to favor one side, you want to favor the inside. Let me just show you what I mean. If you favor the outside, doing a taper like that, it looks terrible. Now I'm going to show you the better way. You favor the inside, like this. Oops. You actually want that to stay there, be the same size as the outside stuff. See that? That looks a lot better. And I think I do want to thin it down even more. Yeah. I think that looks better. Okay. But what about when I go the other way? Get rid of that. Pull this down. Taper. Okay. Now I rotate either way, and it looks pretty good for something so simple, right? These are really thick lines, so it's just how it works. Now, if I want to reset all of those keyframes so that the arm goes back to the way that I originally built it, I select these pegs and press R. Weird. I don't know why I had to click on the drawing layer. Unless I want to check and make sure that it's not accepting keyframes. Controls. Yeah, that thing is not checked, so the art layer is not receiving keyframes. It was the peg. Alright, so now the arm is back to normal. I could rotate it. It's got the stuff. But what happens if I z-depth this behind? So right now, this arm would be like coming in front of the body. But what if I want the forearm to go behind the body? If I want to press Alt up, this is z-depthing this thing into the screen. This is now behind the body. And just so you can see what's happening. Because the drawing layer, I'll show you what I just went through in the properties and in the timeline, because I think maybe that looked a little confusing, the way that I just did it. Okay. It did add a... The forearm has a mat. That's weird. Okay. So when we move a drawing layer, watch what happens. If I'm using the transform tool and animate current frame, if I click on this and you see how it selected the drawing layer, I move this. In the timeline, it actually puts a keyframe up on the forearm peg. So it's not putting a keyframe on the drawing layer. And if you don't understand what keyframes are, it's just recording the position and everything. So let me press undo. Watch, when I move that, it says, okay, the XYZ stayed at 0, the scale is still 0, but the angle changed. Or if I start squashing and stretching it or skewing it, all of that fun stuff. But then if I click on the peg and I press R, it resets it all back to 0s and 1s. Now, I really do not like clicking on little drop downs to go searching for things that I need. So I like to use the coordinate toolbar up here. You can just right click and choose coordinate and watch what happens. Whenever I rotate it, squash and stretch it, the values that you see down here are the exact same values that you're going to see up here at the top in the coordinate toolbar. So that's my preference. I don't like digging into these things. I'm going to press reset. Alright, so actually I'm going to rotate it and z-depth it back. Alright, so what happens when we do this? Now we need to set it up so that the upper part of the arm is going to behave the same way that the forearm is. We want to give a crease to it, we want it to get cut by the auto patch, all that fun stuff. So this is exactly a repeat of what I just barely did below. Okay, I want a cutter. Sometimes what I like to do is name what's happening on this. So I will say forearm lines cut by up arm auto patch. Okay, yeah, I know it's huge, giant, but at least people understand what's going on, right? I'm gonna copy and paste that cutter. I need to slide it into the line art. I'm going to call it what it's going to be, so I'm just gonna call it the up arm lines cut by forearm auto patch. Alright, cool. So I fixed that. That's working. Now I just need to add the crease, right? So just so that things aren't all on top of each other, I'm going to do that little waypoint thing. You can actually set a shortcut for it. You click on it, press Ctrl W. Oh, that's my shortcut at least. And move it so that we don't have a big traffic jam down here. Then I'm going to take the overlay layer and plug it in right there. So now I need to get some art onto the overlay layer. So I'm going to go to the upper arm, line art, select this stuff, copy it, go up to the overlay, paste it all. I'll turn it green so I can see the difference. I'll use my cutter tool and I'm going to cut it right where it starts to arc. So right there and right there. Okay. Now I'm going to use my width tool, Alt W. That's my shortcut that I use, but it's the pencil editor is the name of it. And actually in the drawing view it's usually easier to see this. Drawing view, show the eyeball. You want it to overlap the piece below, but you don't want it to ever like go outside or anything like that. So let's favor it like this. Remember we said that we could favor it, but you need to do it this way. I bet I can pull that further in. Let's see what it looks like. And I'm going to select it and turn it back to the correct color. It's going to be the clothes line. Okay. Cool. If you don't like seeing this purple highlight, you can click on this B-box selection style so you can see what it'll look like without the highlight. That looks pretty good. Okay, now if I press Alt down, this is bringing Z-depth towards me. Alt down, it's in front. Alt forward, pushing it away from me into the screen. So I've got both of those situations set up, and notice I am on the peg layer, and I can see the coordinate toolbar here. If I press Alt up, it shows 0.001b. That's for the Z value. It's back just a little bit. And then if I press R to reset it, it goes back to 0. So now I have my forearm and upper arm, the tricky part, built. Alright, so what's next? I want the cuff line, and I want the cuff line to only show up down here. So let's plug the cuff line in so we can at least see it. Okay, now I'm pretty sure I want it to be behind the line, so I'm going to put it behind the overlay and behind the line art. Boom, boom, right? Yeah, that's the auto patch stuff. Okay. Alright, so now let's turn it the right color, right? That's on the line art layer, clothesline, and now we just need to say, hey, you are only allowed to show up when you are on the color art stuff of the forearm. Alright, so let's do this. Let's bring in another cutter. In Harmony 20, you can get to the node library by just pressing Enter in the node view. Type cutter, enter, hold Alt or Option, and drag it into that cable. I'm going to drag it down here so there's not so much overlap everywhere. Now this thing, I want it to get cut by the color art of the forearm, right? So let me drag that in. Oh, that's doing the wrong thing. I want just the opposite of that. It's cutting it, but I want it to like reveal it. So this is all you have to do. You double click the little mask, and it is called an invert cutter. An inverted cutter. I like to go and rename it so that it makes sense to people. I'm going to call it Cuff Line Revealed by Forearm. LA for line art. Okay. So now, whenever that gets moved, it's only going to show up when it is on the forearm. Okay, now we've got that working. The last part is to get the hand working. Now the hand, I want to show you how to make a layered hand, and it's a very useful thing to be able to do. There are a few ways that you can go about doing it. I'm going to try to show you the simplest way. Alright, so I am going to want overlay, line art, color art, underlay, all that stuff again. So here I am in that group, I'm copying and pasting. Now the reason I put it into a group is watch what happens. If I now paste again, it's going to put an _1 on all of them. And I don't like there being all that mess on stuff. It's just, you can't have two of the same thing in the same node view. You can in different groups. Anyways, just know that you can't have two things named the same thing. So it keeps adding these numbers on the end. That's why I just keep it in a group. You can have things named the same as long as they are in different groups. And because this little layers group thing is sitting over here, all of those things are inside of it. There's not a conflict when I name them all this way out here. Sorry, it probably sounds complicated. I am going to add a prefix, and I'm going to say hand underscore. Okay, with the hand, now this is where it starts to get a little funky, if you didn't think it was funky enough already. I'm going to move the waist and just put it with the torso. Hold Alt, make this arm backdrop real big. Okay. The hand. I want to show you what happens when you press copy and paste using a drawing layer or a peg in the node view. It's kind of weird. I'm going to press copy, paste. It makes a clone, a timed clone. The place where you could see this is actually in the timeline. So here I am in the timeline. If I were to right click, I could choose clone, selected layers, drawings only, or drawings and timing. So when you press copy paste and you're doing a drawing layer, this is what it defaults to doing. And let me show you the advantages and disadvantages of doing that. My most often thing that I do with cloning is this option, but I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so here's the hand. I've got hand 1. I might as well just go copy, paste, paste. Right now, these clones are all pretty much exactly the same thing. So I'm going to rename them. I'm going to call it hand clone 1. Select all, copy, and then I'm going to call this hand clone 2. I'm just pasting what I had copied. 3. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to filter them. So I only want the overlay coming through this. I only want the line art coming through this. Color art. Underlay. I'm going to select all those. Actually, I'm going to select this. Control H, hold Alt, slide that composite in, rename it. This is going to be the hand comp. Select all of these. Control H, just bundles them together, plug that in, delete that. Okay, so now I've got the overlay coming through, line art, color art, underlay. And I'm going to go ahead and add Control-Shift-P, a peg to each of those. And then finally, I'm going to add one more peg. I'm going to select these, Control-P, take this cable, connect it to the top, connect this over here, and we'll call this the hand master peg. Okay. So I will now show you what I'm going to do with that. So remember how we had left the thumb. I'm just going to show you what I'm up to here. Okay, so the thumb, I wanted to be able to separate that. So I'm going to use the stroke tool, Alt-V, and I am just going to draw a stroke like this. Okay, I just want it to cut right there. Now I'm going to cut it. I'm going to use the cutter, click. Now notice how sharp that is. I could use the pencil editor and pull a little half circle out the end, or before I use the cutter tool, I can change the cutter tip style to round. That way when I cut it, there's going to be a round end on that side and a round end on the other side. I'm going to go to the underlay layer and paste this, okay? And there's a little part that got left behind, that guy. All right, select those, join them. Okay, so now I have, when I'm looking at all of it, up here on the line art, I don't have the thumb, but I do have the thumb down here on the underlay. I'm going to press K so I can see my strokes. I'm going to use the stroke tool, Alt-V, and I'm going to continue the art. Alt-Y, paint unpainted. This is going to be the potato. Okay. And then here, I am going to show you how to make a fully layered hand. Watch. I'm going to take this finger and I'm going to put it on the overlay layer. Okay. And then if that finger ever moves, I now need to make sure that I have the rest of the finger behind it showing, right? I need the rest of that to be complete. Alt-W. Get rid of that, the width. It's my shortcut that I set for the pencil editor tool. holding shift to make it come in on both sides at the same rate. Okay. And then what if I even wanted that one to be separate? Here, I'm gonna cut this stuff and put it on the color art layer. Okay. And now I need to think about, all right, if that finger moves, I need to make sure that there's some art behind it. Select those, join them together, width, get rid of that, contour editor, touch it up. Okay, so now I've got all of these finger pieces, right? Okay, let's finish these strokes. Okay. Alt-Y, paint. Oops, I want to get that. Alt-V, stroke tool. Alt-Y, paint unpainted. And then this needs to be everything else, like it needs to fill everything in, so maybe like that. Let's go take a look and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's probably all right. Alt-Y, paint unpainted. Okay, now let's go see what we've got. Now, they all look like they're together right now, but look, I can move that finger separately. I can move this finger separately. I can move this back chunk of the hand, or I can move this thumb. I could even put something in between the hand now, between the thumb and the fingers. So let me just keep walking you through this on how this works. Now, you might ask, well, Matt, where's the best place to put a pivot? Because the hands are going to be drawn different all the time. Like that thumb is not always going to have the pivot in one spot. Let me show you the best method that I like to use. So there's this pivot script that came from Cartoon Flow. If you look at their website, you can copy the pivot position and then select all the others and paste to the pivot position. So I love that. The slow way was what I showed you earlier. You could open up both the layer properties and manually copy all that stuff, but I love that script. Cartoonflow.com. All right, so now what we can do is that finger is rotating from there. That's okay, ish, you know. You can temporarily move this thing. I'm using the transform tool and animate current frame. You can temporarily move it. Notice how the ghost is still living back here. That means as soon as you deselect, the pivot point will go back to where it belongs. But while you are using this, you can do this kind of thing. There, check that out. You can make it look like this hand is reaching for something. And then move it down a little bit. And then, if you decide, you know what, I want it to go back to normal, just select all your pegs and press R. Reset it all. You want to make sure that when you're drawing new hand swaps, that all of these have zeros and ones. Like you want to select all of them and press R before you start drawing so that on the different line art, color art layers, it's not moving them around in weird spots. All right, so this hand is separated. So this hand, what do I like to call it? This is default, so this is going to be 0. This is angle 0. So I will name this hand. I pressed Control D to rename. Default underscore 000. Okay. Now I am going to rename it, and I'm going to call it separated. That was incorrect. I'm going to duplicate this. Alt-Shift-D. Okay, it's also this button. And you can see here in the drawing substitution window, I've got two swaps. One called default 0 separated, and then one just called 1. Whenever you make a new drawing layer in Harmony in the timeline, it's just going to name it 1, 2, 3, or sorry, a new drawing swap. It'll just give it whatever the next number is. Now I'm going to show you how you would usually have this hand. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. I'm going to get rid of that color fill, color fill, color fill, color fill. I'm going to take this, bring it down here, bring this, cut, paste, cut, paste. So it's all on the line art, right? Because that's usually how we have it. You can get rid of all these little strokes that are invisible. Use the trim, the cutter tool. Snip, snip, snip. Okay, this is usually how our stuff will look. Use my paint unpainted. There's the hand. Usually you take the color and put it on the color art layer, right? So this is the normal way that most hands are. They're not separated into all of those little sub layers. Now let me show you an issue that's going to happen, okay? If anybody clicks on the hand and tries to move it, that's not a cool behavior. It's moving the color art independent of the line art. Now, same with the lines. Now, most of the time you don't need the hands separated. Most of the time you want this hand to all just move together, unless it's a special occasion, right? So this is what I like to do. I like to unplug this peg, so I just hold Alt, and I hold Alt and unplug. So now, when I click on any normal hand that only has line art and color art, it automatically jumps up to the hand master peg, so it moves the whole thing together. Now, if you come to a scene where you need 4 layers of separation, then that's when you add these other pegs in, and then you have that level of detail that you need to split them all up. Another advantage of doing this is that you can see a full preview of the hand, because these previews show you the line overlay, line art, color art, underlay all at once. That's what these show. You can build a hand rig where the thumb is separate, the fingers are separate. You could do that with separate pegs, but then when you click on the hand or those pieces, you're not going to see a preview of the full thing. So you can even sync them. You can sync hands. Just look that up in the Harmony documentation or watch my other video if you want to see how to do synced hand layers with lots of different pieces. But this is the way I prefer to go, and it works for almost everything that I need. So, all right, so there you go. You've got the layered hand. I would probably just call this one default _000. That way I can swap between them if I need something to happen. So watch this. I'm gonna, oh, I want my stuff here. Watch, if I move this and then I click on this and I press Alt up, this is pushing it back in Z space. So this is how you can make the hand like hold something. And I could even, I might be able to push this one back. Oh no, I would need to plug these in order to get that to work, if I wanted that to also go behind. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. So now we've got the layered hand. I want to select it all and press reset, put it back to normal where it's supposed to be. Right now that hand is in front of the coat, which I do not want. I want the hand to be behind the forearm by default. So all the forearm stuff, let's see, is there. So I can plug the hand in here, so it's behind the forearm. And now I've got my hand and my arm all figured out and ready to go. And if I press Alt down, I can bring it in front. Okay. Now, the next thing to do is going to be adding deformers to all of these pieces, except for the hand. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to add envelope deformers. All right, here's my upper arm. I'm going to click on, I'm going to center on selection down here. I'm going to click on solo, and I'm going to click on this outline mode. All right, I am going to click on the hammer and the wrench in the deformer toolbar. I'm going to click on this little plus, create new deformation chain. I'm going to choose envelope deformer mode, and then I am going to start, oh wait, I don't want the first point to be in the elbow joint. I want it to be at like the armpit, someplace I don't care about being perfectly smooth all the time. Hold Alt or Option to change your little icon at the end to the little C so it will close. And I like to use the outline mode because I can get it to be perfect. Alright, now a general rule of thumb. I usually like to make these handlebars, if I don't know how long to make them, I make them about a third of the distance between the 2 points, just so that they can deform, a good amount of things. The thing that I would avoid is don't make one of them tiny like that and one of them huge like this. It gets really weird when you start adjusting those, so just the rule of thirds. Notice that I count on coming back to adjust these handlebars. If you accidentally click somewhere and make another deformer point, press undo, okay? You don't want that. Okay, so I'm just moving these, doing this little deformer dance until it matches perfectly with that joint. Alright, now I'm done. I am going to click on that layer again, go find that, uncheck the outline mode, uncheck the solo mode, and now I am going to see how it works. Alt up, push that back. Alright, so now I can change how that is working. Now I will tell you, I usually like to put the deformer points just past the edge, the end of the deformer point, but I guess I will just leave it here. Like, my option would be to either like make that deformer point so that it ends, or sorry, make the crease end sooner. Let me try that. Reset, up. Actually, I guess that kind of works. See, I like to put it just past the end because then it's really easy to choose where the end of the line is going to be. So I guess I will be adjusting my little tapers here. Cutter tool. Cut it, width tool, pull it out, favor this side. Whoa, something's going on there. There's a lot of points going on. Okay. Yeah, now it'll be a lot easier for me to control where that point is going to be. Okay, so now that I've got the deformer set up for the upper arm, now I'm going to go and set up the deformer for the lower arm, and I think I'll just speed through this for you because it's all the same stuff. Oh, I want to tell you what I just did there. I broke the corner. Usually the handlebars work in tandem like this, but if you hold Alt or Option, you can break it to a corner. It's kind of like convert to corner in other software with Bezier curves. Okay, now I'm trying to solo the cuff line, but when something is being revealed or invert cut to something, it won't show up. So here's another way that you can isolate it. You press Control Y to add a display, hold Alt, and then view through that display. Wrong display. There. So now I can do that, and notice how this is an envelope deformer, but I've only used 2 points. It's not a closed envelope, but look at what I can do. Now to test your envelope, you press Shift-T, and you can move the lines around, the points. You can stretch and squash that stuff, and even the first point can be moved around. If you use the curve set of deformers, that one, your first point will always like move the entire line. Just stay away from it. Don't use the curve one. Just use the envelope deformer. Okay, that one's doing good. Go back to my display 2. Okay, so I've got deformers on this entire arm. I can get whatever I want. I can move these out. I can make it nice and thick. I can make like a big blur frame if I needed to by stretching everything. I can make a pointed elbow by holding Alt and like breaking that corner. Alt. It's being funny. Then you can just line it up perfectly and get a corner. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do. And then if you want to reset your deformers, what you do is you select all of your your deformer groups. Let me show you. So we now have Art, the deformer group, and the peg. Okay. So what you do is you select your deformer groups, and then you press this button on the deformation toolbar called Reset Current Keyframe, and it resets all of the deformers back to their original starting position. So now we've got the hand, and the arm is completely finished. So I am, well, there's two more things to do, but I am going to group this whole thing, and I want to give you a little heads up that it's not going to work perfectly when I group it. Watch what happens. I have a few parts that are not connected. So like that underlay layer is not connected to anything on the bottom, and this one isn't. So watch what happens. When I choose group, which you could do right click, group, or just Control G, that's a standard shortcut for a lot of software. Notice that there's this weird little port. So because these guys were not connected initially, when I grouped it, it gave it its own composite. It's kind of weird. We don't need it. I didn't want them to be hooked up. The reason that I leave this here is if people want to be able to see the backup pivot circles, like the articulation circles is what we call them, they could plug it in front of everything so that they could see it, but most of the time you're not going to use it, so you'll want to come back and clean that up. And then a couple more things that I like to do before I call an arm done is I'm going to do this. Oh, what are these? Oh, we don't want those connected either. So now what I like to do is come through here, select all this stuff, insert a backdrop, and choose, I'll call this upper arm. It's just a lot easier to look at a backdrop like that when you have all these cables going all over the place. Maybe I'll make this yellow, I'll call it the hand. And this is going to be the forearm. I'll go orange, red, orange, yellow. That sounds nice. Forearm, okay. I'm going to click and I'm going to press Control R, and I'm going to say that this is the arm handle. going to add and close. I'm going to slide this over here. Actually, I like to put it up here close to the peg. And then I'm going to hook this up. I'll hook it up in front of everything. And then I will add the waypoint. Again, you could click in the middle after it's highlighted, or I have a shortcut Control W to add the waypoint. You can move it down here so it's not a big mess. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Alt equals, which is going to be my ellipse tool, and I'm going to put this on the line art layer. So I'm on my ellipse. I don't want a fill. Sorry, I don't want a stroke, but I do want a fill, and I want to use the handle. And I am just going to hold Shift and put this here. And then on the overlay, so the eyeball, I'm going to just draw a little arm, like a stick figure arm. Oops, I don't know what happened there. Okay, I'm going to use just a dark color. I'm going to hold O. Check this out. You can resize your brush right on the screen if you hold the letter O and you drag left and right. Okay. This is on the color art layer. I didn't mean for that to happen. I want that on the overlay. Okay. That thumb. Alright, so I've got this, and I'm going to call this a selector. Watch what happens, okay? When you're animating, you'll click somewhere, and then you can move that. Or if you press B, it goes up the chain, and I want you to understand what's happening here, okay? So I'm going to select the forearm. As you'll see, it's selecting this piece. If I press B, it disappears. That's because it went into the deformation group. I press B again, goes up to the forearm. Notice how it's highlighted yellow. It used to be highlighted blue when it's on the drawing layer. And it will only highlight these colors if you're using the animate current frame. If you're on the red one, it highlights different colors. So it's a little yellow guy. So I'll click on this. I'm in the deformer group. I press B again, I'm on the forearm. I press B again, I'm on the forearm master peg. I press B again, and it will climb up to the next part of the chain. So I have to press B like 5 times to get up to that point. It would be nice if there were a quick way to select the entire arm without having to press B a bunch of times. And there is. When you're using the select tool and the transform tool, you can click on this little layer property peg selection mode. Watch this. When I click on the hand, or the forearm, boom, it jumps straight up. It jumps straight up past the drawing layer and the deformation layer, straight to the peg. Here, if I click on this little layer selector thing that I made, I click on that handle, and it jumps straight up to the arm master peg. This is really, really helpful when you're animating, because you're going to animate really fast and you want to select some parts really quickly. So, cutout animators will often be working in peg selection mode, where it's just selecting the pegs and jumping up to them really quickly. Alright, so now this is good, but if I press render, watch what happens. I'm going to see that purple thing, and I don't want to see that purple thing. So let me show you how we can avoid seeing the purple thing. We are going to go to the node library, and we're going to pull in a visibility node. So it's this eyeball. I'm going to hold Alt, drag it into the cable. I'm going to look at the properties, and it has 2 properties. Display in OpenGL view, that's the working view that we're seeing right now in the camera. And then there's soft render, that just means render out or not. So I'm going to uncheck render. So watch, now I click render, and it's invisible. So it's just there to help us while we are working as we are animating. And so now I am done with this arm, and I'm going to name the group that I made. I'm just going to call it arm. You don't have to leave it with group on the end. And the last thing that I'm going to show you how to do is clone the arm, but we'll do that later after I build the rest of the body. I'm going to build the leg and the coat and all that fun stuff. So I will stop the video here. and continue on in the next video doing all the other pieces, and that'll be great. Thanks. See you soon!